They say every house has a story, every wall absorbs laughter, arguments, the cries of children, and secrets, whispered in the dark. Most homes simply keep those memories silent, fading into wallpaper, into dust, into echoes, only time itself can hear. But some houses do not just hold memories. Some houses remember, and some, if you are unlucky enough to step inside, will speak. This is not a tale of superstition, or a ghost story meant for campfires. This is a true account, pieced together from brittle police reports, yellowed newspaper clippings, and the broken voices of survivors, who still refuse to go near the place again. It is a story locals of Maple Hollow tried to erase, whispering its name only in hushed tones when they think no one listens. A house so feared that entire streets grow quiet if it is spoken aloud. They call it the house that spoke, and once you hear its whispers, you will never listen to silence the same way again. Before we go further, I want you to do something for me. Look around the room you are in right now. Notice the silence. Notice the stillness of the walls, the shadows in the corners. Have you ever wondered what those walls would say if they could? What secrets they might keep? Now imagine stepping into a place where walls do not just keep secrets. They pour them into your ears, whether you want to hear them or not. That is what the Walker family discovered when they entered the house. On Maple Hollow Road, a family searching for a fresh start, yet finding themselves caught inside a nightmare, steeped in screams, silence, and blood. The Walkers were not dreamers. They were ordinary people. Mr. Walker, a man of routine. Mrs. Walker, a woman of faith, and their two children, innocent and unprepared. They saw the faded paint, the cracked porch, the way the windows stared blankly outward. But they convinced themselves it was only an old house, an empty shell, waiting for life again. They ignored the stories. They ignored the silence that seemed heavier at the end of that road. And when they crossed the threshold, they did not realize they had stepped into something alive, something breathing, something waiting. The air was colder inside, not the chill of weather, but of memory. The smell was faint, mildew, and something else, something metallic. In the silence they heard it first, a voice so soft, it could have been mistaken for imagination. It was late on their first night, somewhere around 1 a.m., when Mrs. Walker froze in bed, her eyes wide, because the walls had whispered her name, not once, not twice, but in a slow, deliberate breath that coiled around her ears, as if spoken from inside her own skull. She told Mr. Walker, but he laughed nervously, insisting it was a dream yet. When 2 a.m. came, he too sat upright, trembling because the walls whispered again, not her name, this time, but his and the children. Did not sleep either. By 3:14 a.m., their daughter began to cry, insisting a man was speaking to her from inside the closet, telling her things she could not repeat. By dawn the Walkers knew what every survivor would later confess. The house did not creak or settle, it spoke. It remembered every voice that ever bled into its halls, and now it wanted theirs. What the walls told them next would make them wish they had never opened that front door. Chapter 1. It was 1994, when Michael Walker and Sarah Walker, along with their 10-year-old daughter, Emily, pulled into the long weed-choked driveway of the house on Maple Hollow Road in Ohio. The realtor, a woman with a polite smile that did not quite reach her eyes, told them the property had been sitting on the market for more than 20 years. Buyers came, buyers left, some even signed papers, only to withdraw. Suddenly, without explanation. That should have been a warning sign. But the Walkers were desperate. They had been living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in town, where the machines rattled and groaned through the night, and the air always smelled faintly of detergent and mildew. They wanted space. They wanted quiet. They wanted a place to call their own. And here it was. A sprawling three-story colonial, with tall windows, catching the sunlight, peeling white paint, hinting at former elegance, and a wide porch sagging with age. A place that whispered of history. A place that begged to be lived in again. To Sarah, it had potential. A new coat of paint, a few repairs, and it could be beautiful to Michael. It was an investment. A property this size, at this price, was an opportunity he could not pass up. But to Emily, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit at the edge of the driveway, it felt different. She stared at the house, as though it were staring back, and whispered, "It does not want us here." Her parents exchanged tired smiles. Children had wild imaginations. She would get used to it. But even Michael and Sarah had to admit the air inside was strange. When they unlocked the heavy front door, a stale gust of air poured out, thick with dust and age. But beneath the dust was something else, something heavier, like stepping into a room where someone had been holding their breath for decades. The wooden floor groaned under their steps, as though the house itself resented the weight of strangers. Wallpaper curled away from the walls in long strips, and a chandelier hung above the entryway, its glass darkened with grime, like an unblinking eye. Emily refused to let go of her mother's hand. That night, while boxes still lay unopened, and mattresses sat directly on the floor, Sarah lay awake. Michael was beside her, already snoring softly after the long day of hauling furniture. But Sarah's eyes kept drifting toward the doorway. The hallway beyond was pitch black, except for the faintest silver glow from the moon outside, and in that darkness, she swore she heard it, a voice, soft female, so close it could have been someone leaning into her ear. "Are you awake, Sarah?" Froze, her chest tightened, breath caught in her throat. She turned her head, expecting to see Michael whispering in his sleep, but he was turned away, his lips parted, his snores steady. The sound had not come from him. For the rest of the night, Sarah lay stiff, her eyes fixed on the shadows in the doorway, telling herself it was just the house, settling, just her imagination. But the next morning, over cereal, at the kitchen table, Emily casually asked a question that made her blood run cold. "Mom," Emily said, spoon clinking against the bowl, "who was talking outside my door last night?" Sarah's hand froze in midair. The spoon she was holding trembled, milk dripping slowly back into her bowl. She forced a smile. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "The woman," Emily said, tilting her head, as though trying to remember. "She said my name. She said, 'Come play.'" Sarah laughed it off. "Moving into a new house can make you dream strange things, honey." But Emily only frowned, her small voice quiet, firm. It was not a dream. She was standing in the hallway. "I saw her shadow under the door." Michael brushed it aside. He had work on his mind, bills, repairs. He reminded Sarah that kids imagine things during stressful times. But Sarah could not shake it. She had heard a voice too. That night, as she unpacked boxes in the living room, she felt it again. The heaviness, not just silence, the feeling that she was not alone, that someone was watching. When she turned, the hallway stretched before her, its wallpaper torn, its light bulbs dead, and though it was empty, she could have sworn something had just slipped out of sight. The Walkers had only been in the house for less than 48 hours already. It had begun to speak. Chapter 2. The first month was quiet, or at least it looked quiet from the outside. The neighbors waved politely when the Walkers drove past, but never stopped for small talk. No casseroles were brought. No one introduced themselves. It was as if the entire street wanted nothing to do with the house. On Maple Hollow Road, inside, life went on. Boxes were unpacked, furniture arranged, rooms claimed. Sarah filled the kitchen with the smell of home, cooked meals. Michael spent his weekends patching broken steps, fixing old shutters, trying to scrape away the decades of neglect on the surface. It was a fresh start, but the whispers never stopped. At first they were easy to dismiss: old wood, groaning pipes knocking in the walls, drafts winding through unseen cracks. Every old house had a personality, did it not? But this house's voice was different. It was not just noise, it was words. Michael was the first to notice. One evening, standing in the upstairs bathroom, he leaned over the sink. Shaving the mirror was cracked down the middle, distorting his reflection into two uneven halves, and that is when he heard it. His name, Michael, so soft, so close spoken from just over his shoulder. He spun, razor clattering into the sink, foam dripping down his chin. The room was empty. The door behind him was closed. He stood there staring into the empty hall beyond the doorframe. When he finally came back to himself, he laughed it off. Stress, he muttered, too much work, too much caffeine, but the laugh did not sound like his own. Emily heard it. Next, she was playing in her room, arranging her dolls in a crooked circle on the carpet. The air in the room was always a little colder than the rest of the house, enough that Sarah had put an extra blanket at the foot of her bed. As Emily leaned down to fix one of the doll's tiny dresses, she froze. Someone was laughing, not loudly, not joyfully. It was faint, like a child giggling into their hands. The sound came from the corner of the room, the darkest corner, where the light bulb had burned out weeks ago. Emily did not move. Her lips trembled, but she forced herself to whisper, "Hello." The laughter stopped instantly, and in the stillness that followed, she thought she heard someone whisper her name. Sarah tried not to believe her family's unease. But one night, the house found her too. She had been lying in bed, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling fan, as it clicked in slow circles. Then out of nowhere, she heard it. A voice she had not heard in over 20 years. Her mother's voice, Rosie, her childhood nickname, a name only her late mother had ever used. Sarah sat up, her throat closing, tears pricked her eyes as she whispered into the darkness, "Mom." For a heartbeat, she let herself believe it, that maybe, just maybe, her mother had found a way back to her. But what answered was not her mother. It was something colder, a long drawn-out hiss of air that filled the room, shaking the window panes. Sarah clutched the blanket to her chest and stayed awake until dawn. They all told themselves the same thing. It is stress. It is moving. It is an old house, playing tricks. But the voices did not stop. They grew bolder. They began to speak, not just to the family, but with them. It was Emily who tested it first. Late one night, she lay in bed, her stuffed rabbit pressed to her chest. The whispers had been circling her room for hours. Faint giggles, soft sighs, the sound of something brushing against the walls. Finally, Emily gathered her courage. She whispered into the dark, "Who are you at?" First, there was silence, then a chorus. Not one voice, not two. Dozens, faint, layered, echoing through the walls themselves, as though the house were breathing words into its own bones. "We live here." Emily buried her head under the covers, tears streaming down her face. But even under the blanket, she heard them closer, now louder, right beside her ear. "We live here." The next morning, she told her parents what happened, and though Michael tried to hide the fear, and Sarah forced a smile, they had heard it too. The house was awake, and it wanted them to know. Chapter 3. By the third month, the house wasn't just whispering. It was mocking. Doors slammed without wind, sometimes gently as though teasing, other times with such violence that frames cracked and glass rattled in its panes. The walkers started locking doors, but it didn't matter. The locks clicked open on their own hinges, groaned as doors swung wide, exposing empty hallways, waiting like open mouths. At 3 a.m., without fail, the radio in the living room clicked on. It didn't play music. It didn't play news. It hissed static, broken, distorted waves of sound, but buried within the static were voices, not one, not two. A whole crowd, murmuring, chanting, arguing, whispering over one another, words too quick to understand. Michael once leaned close, trying to make sense of it, and swore he heard his own name spoken back to him. "Michael, stay." Michael. The next night, Sarah unplugged the radio, but at 3 a.m., on the dot, it turned on anyway, cord dangling uselessly against the wall. Emily's toys were no longer hers. She would leave them scattered on the floor before school, only to return to find them arranged, always arranged. Her dolls set neatly in circles, their blank eyes staring inward, heads tilted as though listening to something at the center, her jump rope tied into knots. She couldn't untangle her crayons stacked into towers, balanced impossibly high, until the slightest touch toppled them. At first she thought it was her parents, a cruel joke. Maybe, but the night she woke to the sound of tiny feet pattering across her room, the circle already completed at the foot of her bed, she realized the truth. Someone had been playing while she slept. But the worst of all was the basement. From the very beginning, that door had been wrong. It was nailed shut when they moved in. Michael assumed it was for safety. Rotten steps, maybe, or a collapsing floor. But Sarah noticed something else. Something Michael had overlooked. The wood wasn't just old. It was scarred. Deep, jagged marks dragged across its surface, splintering it. Not the kind made by tools. Not random scratches of time. Claw marks, as if something had been trying to get out, or as if someone had been trying desperately to keep it in. And every night, the whispers seemed to gather there, low-layered, pulsing like a heartbeat. Just behind the door, a deep murmur that rose and fell, too many voices to count one stormy night. After weeks of torment, Michael snapped the thunder. Outside was deafening, rattling the house to its bones. Emily was crying. Sarah, begging him to just leave it alone. But Michael had had enough. He grabbed his crowbar. His hands shook as he jammed it under the first board, cracked the wood, split another board, and another. The moment the last nail screeched free, the house seemed to exhale a long, low sigh that made every light flicker. The smell hit first: damp earth, rust, mold, something else too. Something sweet and rotten, like spoiled meat. The air that spilled out was cold, unnaturally cold. When Michael pulled the chain light, the bulb swung in a slow, lazy arc, barely piercing the gloom below. And that's when they saw it. The basement wasn't empty. On the far wall were scratches, not random, not shallow, deliberate, carved deep into the stone foundation itself. But at the center, words had been carved. Silence. Then, and then they saw the chair bolted to the floor. Iron shackles, waiting, and the chain snapped, plunging them into darkness. Not whispers, not murmurs, screams, 100 voices, shrieking at once, the walls trembling, the door above slamming shut, the sound inside their heads, and then sudden silence, as the door creaked open by itself, leaving them in the dark, knowing whatever had been kept below was no longer contained. Chapter 4. Sarah could not sleep after what they found in the basement. The screams, the chair bolted to the floor, the words carved into stone. It played over and over in her mind, until the darkness itself seemed to whisper it back to her. Michael buried himself in repairs, hammering nails, sanding floors, forcing the house into normality, while Emily clung to her toys, playing in silence, afraid to ask questions. Sarah, however, needed answers, and so she turned to the town records. The dusty drawers in City Hall, filled with yellowed pages and fragile paper. She spent hours under the buzzing lights, reading until her eyes blurred. What she found made her blood run cold. The house had once belonged to Dr. Aaron Kline, a respected physician in the 1940s, or at least respected. At first he opened a small practice out of his home, their home, tending to neighbors' farmhands, children. But the deeper Sarah dug, the more the picture shifted. Neighbors complained of screams at night, echoing through the hollow, strange smells, acrid and chemical like burning hair. Patients entered his home, but not all of them returned. A farmer swore his brother went in for a checkup and never came back. Dr. Kline explained the disappearances, with the same cold line, again and again. They had left town. They would not be coming back. There was never a forwarding address. No letters. No trace. A school teacher gone. Then a young mother. Then a child. Each vanished into silence. Police investigated more than once. They searched the house, the grounds, the woods behind Maple Hollow, but they found nothing. No blood, no bodies, no proof. Frustration gave way to fear, and the complaints dwindled. People looked the other way, until 1952, the year Dr. Kline himself vanished. Some whispered, he fled under the weight of suspicion. Others swore the house had taken him, swallowed him whole, just as it had swallowed so many before him. Whatever the truth, he was never seen again, but the house remained. And with it, the rumors. Sarah dug deeper, chasing the whispers of survivors. One family lasted 6 months before fleeing in the dead of night. The father claimed voices called his name, until he could no longer tell waking. From dreaming, the mother reported dreams so heavy, she woke with bruises on her arms, convinced someone had pinned her down. The youngest daughter swore the house, whispered secrets. Another family stayed only 3 weeks. Their son stopped eating, saying the house told him food was no longer necessary. Their daughter began to draw pictures of the basement, though she had never set foot inside. And one night, the parents found her scratching the words, "Silence them," into the floorboards, with her fingernails. By the 1970s, the house stood empty. No tenants, no buyers. The legend of Maple Hollow grew. Children dared each other to run up and knock on the porch door. Teenagers pressed their ears to the walls, swearing they heard voices, begging to be let out. Some said if you lingered on the porch at midnight, the door would creak open on its own, and behind it chains would drag slowly across the floor. Sarah pushed the clippings aside, her hands trembling. Every survivor's tale echoed the same voices that called their names. Dreams that bled into reality. The house watching and waiting. She looked up at the cracked ceiling wallpaper, curling at the edges. She thought of Emily, asleep upstairs, and in that moment, she realized the truth. The house did not just have a history, it had a memory. It remembered the doctor, and now it remembered them. The house was not finished collecting. Chapter 5. 6 months after moving into the house on Maple Hollow Road, the Walkers fled. But the house did not let them go quietly. It began as always with Emily. That night, the air was unnaturally still. The cicadas, that usually hummed outside, had gone silent. The house felt expectant, as though holding its breath. At 2:37 a.m., Emily woke screaming. Her window, the one Michael had nailed shut weeks ago, was wide open. Cold air poured into the room, freezing her breath into mist, and standing by her bed was a figure, a man but not a man. He was tall, his body blurred at the edges like smoke. His face was worse. No mouth, just skin, where lips should be. And yet, when he leaned close, she heard him whispering, not from his face, but from everywhere. From the walls, from under the floor, from inside her head. Emily screamed until her throat was raw. Michael and Sarah rushed into her room, but saw only the open window, the curtains blowing like pale arms in the night. Then every television, every radio, every device in the house snapped on at once. The static was deafening, and beneath the static came voices layered endless, a chorus speaking in unison, saying stay, stay, Zetas. The voices did not beg. They commanded. Michael tried to shut the devices off, yanking cords from the wall, but the static kept coming, spilling from speakers, even after the plugs dangled, useless in his hands. The light bulbs above flickered, bursting, one by one, sparks and glass showering the floor. Sarah clutched Emily to her chest, saying, we're leaving now. But the house disagreed. The front door slammed shut on its own. Every window locked tight. The air grew heavy, pressing down on their chests, filling their lungs with whispers. Then came the scratching from the walls, from the floorboards, from the ceiling. It was everywhere, like hundreds of fingernails, clawing to get out, or clawing to get in. And through the scratching came voices, all different, all desperate, saying, "We only wanted to be heard. Don't leave us. Stay in the silence." The whispers overlapped, rising to screams, until words dissolved into shrieking static. Emily, twisted in Sarah's arms, pointing to the staircase, and with wide eyes whispered, "He's coming." And then they heard it. Heavy footsteps. Slow, deliberate, descending from the attic, where no one had been, and the sound of chains dragging against wood. Michael grabbed Sarah's arm. No more hesitation. He shoved furniture aside, and kicked at the back door, until the old lock splintered. The family ran barefoot, into the night gravel, tearing their feet. Emily's screams, carrying into the dark behind them. The house seemed to pulse with life, every window glowing faintly, every door rattling against its frame. And over it all the chorus followed, booming from within the walls, from the trees, from the very air, saying, "Stay, stay." But the walkers did not look back. The police arrived hours later. They found the family huddled in their car, at the edge of town, trembling, refusing to return inside the house. There were no footprints, no sign of intruders. The electronics were unplugged, silent, but on the living room wall, traced faintly, in dust, only visible under flashlight, the officers found words. None of them could explain. "We only wanted to be heard. And that was the last time anyone dared spend a night inside the house. So I leave you with this question. Was the house on Maple Hollow Road truly haunted by the restless victims of Dr. Kline's twisted obsession with silence? Were those screams and whispers the voices of people trapped in the walls begging for release? Or was it something far worse? Something not human at all? Something alive? Something ancient? Something that uses silence, the way a predator uses camouflage, waiting for the next unsuspecting family to move in? Think about it. Every town has that one house. The one kids will not walk past after dark. The one parents tell stories about, to keep their children from wandering too far. The one that sits empty for years, but never quite falls apart, as if it is waiting, watching, preserving itself, for the next victims. Could Maple Hollow be one of those houses? Or is it just one story among thousands homes, that remember too much, homes that never forget? I want to know what you believe. Was this simply a haunting echoes of the past replaying like a broken record? Or did the walkers stumble into something far darker? Something that lingers in the silence? Something that even the police dared not name? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And sometimes I even reply. Because when you share your theories, you are not just talking to me. You might just be talking to the house itself. This is Screams of the Mind. The darkest corner of the internet, where your fears are given a voice every single day. I bring you terrifying stories of psychological horror, true haunted tales, and nightmare-inducing narratives that will crawl under your skin and stay there. If you have not already hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss a descent into the shadows, because tomorrow we return with another story that will shatter the fragile boundary between what is real and what you pray is not. And remember this, when the silence around you feels too heavy, when you swear you hear your name whispered from the dark, when you feel the walls listening, waiting, breathing, it may not be silence at all. It may already be listening. The same way Maple Hollow listened to the walkers, and to every visitor before them. The house may be listening right now, through your headphones, through your speakers, through the space you are in. Think of the walls behind you, think of the floor beneath your feet, think of what could be pressed against it on the other side, and ask yourself, is it memory, is it echo, or is it hunger? Tomorrow night at 3:14 a.m. when the world feels its quietest, listen closely, if you dare, and tell me if you hear it. Whisper your name, because the house that spoke is never done speaking. and it always wants new ears to hear it.
Thank you for watching. If you have not already, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next nightmare. So tonight, I leave you with this. The story may have ended, but the echoes remain. Do you believe it was only fear? Or do you believe something darker still lingers, waiting in the silence? Tell me in the comments below, because every thought, every theory, every shadow you share becomes part of the story. And yes, I read them all. If this tale followed you into the dark, then be ready. Because tomorrow, when the sun sets again, we will step even deeper into the shadows. And trust me, you will want to hear what is waiting there. Until then, remember this. When the floorboards creak, when the reflection shifts, when the night grows too still, it may not be the house settling. Sometimes, it is the house watching you back. Welcome to Screams of the Mind, the darkest corner where fears are given a voice.